He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 25 years of experience. And together, we're the Brief Brothers, having an ongoing conversation about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. We're back, Henry, and today's episode, I think we'll have a lot of fun because it's a deep dive into one of those topics that everybody seems to have trouble with, the single-minded proposition. And I'm kind of happy to share with our audience that we received 4 questions from a young man named Terry Els, all the way from London. He is a student at the School of Communication Arts. We had last week as our guest, the dean of the school, Mark Lewis. And Mark actually spoke very highly of Terry. And looking at the questions that he sent us, I understand why. These are some sharp questions. So I thought what we would do today is we would take on all 4 of these questions, bat around our answers, and then when we're done, we'll have our creative review. So you ready for the first one, Henry?
Let's go, Howard.
Okay, so here's the first question or thought to discuss. Terry asks, crafting a single-minded proposition that feels actionable for creative, which doesn't just sound like it solves the brief. So I'll get started on this one, give you a chance to think about that. That's a great thought, but I think the way to approach this is not even to worry about whether that solves the problem. Because I think the way we look at a creative brief, it's the first step of the creative process. So no creative is going to say, oh, problem solved, I can go home now. We're always going to look at that brief as a jumping off point. It may be the single-minded proposition may be brilliant. It may seem like it's possibly a headline, possibly a great ad, maybe even a tagline or a strapline, as Terry likes to call it. But no creative is going to look at the brief and the single-minded proposition and say, work is done. We're going to use it as a jumping off point. So I don't think that's a real issue to be concerned about. What do you think, Henry?
I'm struggling with the word, the adjective actionable. I'm like, I don't understand. I mean, maybe I'm being dense or I've gotten too old to what he means by actionable. I think an insight should be actionable. It's something that if we can leverage it, it will help us solve the communication problem. What I look for when I'm writing a single-minded proposition is really the standard that I give it is what is you teach in your books, in your workshop, which should be headliney, right? It should somehow be memorable because that's going to help be inspirational, right? And it should be true to the situation that we've described in the other parts of a brief. So for me, to me, the single-minded proposition is that thing is what we talk about. It's what to say, and then the creatives come up with better, more unique ways of saying it.
Well, what I was thinking about, Henry, was the word solves the brief, or the words solve the brief. Rather than actionable. So my answer really resolved around how does a creative view a single-minded proposition? Does it solve the problem? I don't see it as the solution. I see it as a first step or a possible solution. And then, as you were just alluding to, I want to make it better. So I don't look at us at even the most brilliant single-minded proposition as work is done. It's like I want to one up it. I want to go better than that. I want to go beyond that.
Yep.
Okay. So the next one, the fuzzy space between an SMP morphing into a strapline, which is another way of saying a tagline, by accident. So here's my thinking on that. Or do you want to go for it? You want to go for it, Henry?
I'll take this one. I don't think any strategist, planner, or brief writer should set out as a goal that their single-minded proposition become a tagline. That said, I can see and I have had it in my career, where the creatives really loved the single-minded proposition and said, this is a line that we want to use in the advertising. This is a line that, and specifically, and I might have mentioned it on a prior episode, I had one for the Cleveland Clinic, Florida, right? So it's a healthcare provider. They have a different way that they serve their patients. They have a very unique, in this case, differentiated way of serving their patients. And I wrote the brief, and the single-minded proposition was that Cleveland Clinic provides healthcare the way it ought to be. And because of all the problems in healthcare, it just felt right. And because there was a truly differentiated, so our creative director loved the line, and I think he shortened it to just health medicine the way it ought to be was the way that he phrased it. But it was definitely 90% of the way there. And that's ultimately what was used in the campaign. Am I proud of it? Yes. Is that one of my favorite projects that I worked on? Yes. But it wasn't my goal to create a tagline. I think if you get lucky, maybe a creative will find it useful and use your work in the actual ad. But I don't think that should be something people strive for.
And I agree with you, Henry. It's putting an awful lot of pressure on you. There's an awful lot of pressure already to write a single-minded proposition. So much depends on it. There's so much at stake. So don't set out to think that's my objective. If you get really good, if the line is good, that's wonderful. In my first book, I identified, I think, about a dozen examples of single-minded propositions that became taglines. There are probably more, but I found somewhere around a dozen. But that's unusual. It really is a brilliant stroke that you can achieve that. So yeah, it's a fuzzy space. If you set out to do it, I think you're just going to give yourself headaches.
In 25 years, I've had it happen one time. So
yeah, see, yeah, you've actually proved the point. So yeah, go for it if you want to, but my goodness.
I would say don't even go for it. Try to give the best single-minded proposition that you can.
Yeah.
And if you catch lightning in a bottle, great. And you can, feel ownership of that. But that's, a byproduct. That shouldn't be the end goal.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Trusting the creative brief. How do you know when you can trust the brief?
So I talk about testing my brief. I forgot the exact expression that I use when I teach the workshop, but it's basically I bring proof of concept to the briefing. So I will come up with some ad-like objects, an image and a headline, and I will provide them and say, here's a few ways that I think this brief can go. And it's not intended for them to take those specifically and run with them, but merely to pressure test is the word I was looking for earlier, is to pressure test the brief to say, does this lead to different veins of ideation? And so I think that if I can generate 3, 4, 5 different veins of ideation and create different routes creatively, again, understanding that I'm not trying to create the end ad, but just as a proof of concept, then I think I'm pretty satisfied with the brief, and that the whole brief in its entirety is actionable. Yes.
I like that answer. I'm going to take a slightly, I don't know if it's different, maybe it builds on this. I think the answer is you trust the brief because you trust the brief writer. I think it's vitally important that you have a really good relationship between the person who writes the brief or the group of people who write the brief, because as I've mentioned in previous episodes, we don't always have a Henry on staff to write a brief. We don't always have a strategist or an account planner. Sometimes it's marketers who write the brief, and they have to, the best way to do it then is to collaborate either amongst themselves or to bring in a creative to work on this together. So it's about building a team and building that relationship. And when you do that, when you have trust in the person who's writing the brief, then when you, like you just said, Henry, you come in with some pressure tested ideas to show that the brief has legs, people, meaning creatives and other members of the teams, feel comfortable that, yeah, this is going to be a good brief. So you pressure test the brief, but then you also pressure test the relationship. And over time, the more you do this, the tighter the relationship you have with your creative department, there's going to be this symbiotic crystallization of thinking, and you're going to have a great relationship. And that's how you trust the brief.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because something that I don't think gets talked about enough, and we talk about collaboration kind of in a generic, oh, did you run the brief by the creative? Did they collaborate? But I think true collaboration is where there's a team, that where the creative team and the brief writer or the strategist have a good working relationship, and they can bounce things off of each other. And if the brief writer is young and green and the creatives are more experienced, that they can cultivate and teach as well, so that they work better as a team together, which I think is extremely valuable. The best relationships I have with creators are the ones where they come by my office and say, hey, I wanted to run something by you, or what do you think of this? Or that they feel like my input is valuable, and therefore, and they want to kind of have that give and take and ping pong ideas. So I think that that's really important as well, as you said, in terms of trusting the brief writer. Sometimes you got to bring the brief writer along, and you got to help them, right? Like, because it might be a junior, or it might be a different style than you're used to. But just like you get paired with an art director that you never worked with before, right? You got to learn what strengths and weaknesses are and cover off for each other.
Exactly. And I would add one more thing. For me, when I was working as a working creative and had an art director partner, when things were going really well, I could always trust my art director partner to be my BS detector. And I would never be afraid to hear that kind of, that idea sucks. I'd never be afraid to hear that.
It probably took some time to build up that rapport, right? Like this is like a marriage, right? And just like a marriage, the relationship doesn't develop overnight. Like, you have to get to know the person, you have to get to know how they work. And like a relationship, you have to know their weak points and your weak points, and try to make the weak points irrelevant, right?
Exactly. Okay, the last one is the dangers of reverse engineering some fun creative executions into an SMP. I'm going to jump on this one because I do this reverse engineering exercise in my workshops, and you probably do too, Henry. Whenever we do the reverse engineering exercise, we're looking at a TV spot or a print ad or outdoor or something, and try to figure out what the brief was in general, or specifically what the single-minded proposition was. We tend to operate without all the information that the original team might have had. When you write a brief, you have maybe not all the information, but a heck of a lot more than we would have if we were reverse engineering. But I don't think that's a problem. I think that's actually a good thing, because it forces us to try to figure stuff out. Even in the best of circumstances, you as the account planner, the strategist, may not have complete information. You may have a lot of information, but you may have holes. Now, you're going to go out and ask a lot of questions, and you're going to do a lot of research and try to fill in those holes. Whereas doing a reverse engineering exercise, we're just not going to do that. I think the more holes that you have when you do a reverse engineering exercise is actually a good thing, because it forces you to really think like a brief writer or a strategist. And I always recommend that people keep their brains turned on even after they get home after a long day, so that when they watch TV or they pick up a magazine or they're going through Instagram and they see an ad, they're at least aware enough to ask the question, okay, is this ad meant for me? And if it's not meant for me, who are they really talking to? What's the problem they're trying to solve? Try to figure out what the brief is. It's just keeping us sharp. So I don't think there are any dangers, really, because it's a mental exercise.
Yeah, I agree. I really like this question, though. And to me, the first thing I would say is, when I teach my workshops and we do this reverse engineering, I purposely pick ads that aren't the sexiest of ads. I pick brands and products that are real advertisers. I mean, I think I have in my current iteration of the workshop, I have a a phone with a new and improved selfie camera. It's not an iPhone. It's not an Apple product. I have a foot file that is for like removing calluses from your feet. I have hotels.com. I have Volkswagen. I have a range of ads that are real. I'm not taking like things from Cannes and trying to work with that. I'm taking real hardworking advertising and trying to reverse engineer. The other thing is that when I teach at workshops, I tell my participants, I say, our objective here isn't to come up with what was written on the brief for this spot or this ad. It's to come up with a single-minded proposition that could work and could have theoretically led to this ad, theoretically led to it. So to me, it's an exercise that works with repetition. It's not just doing it the one time. It's constantly, to your point. And when you see advertising, say, what were they trying to say here? What was the proposition that they were? And so through repetition, by taking stuff that already exists, I think that's the purpose of the exercise. So it is an exercise. It's not in intent. And does it have its shortcomings? Could it be potentially problem? Sure, if you abuse it or don't know exactly what the limitations are, but in general, I say, use real advertising. In fact, sometimes, and some of the ads that I select for my workshop are frankly bad ads, and we can have that conversation as we're discussing the work. Is this even a good ad?
Yeah, that's a great point. I tend to use really challenging ads that are almost too abstract. One of my favorites for this exercise is the rebranding campaign from, it's probably 15 years ago now, for Johnny Walker. And we've talked about this campaign in the past. Some of their spots were almost art and almost opaque. But that also gets you to thinking about, well, what the heck are they trying to do here? So I love the idea that you use something that could be called bad advertising, but everyday products. I like to use something that's a little more abstract from time to time. I might steal that idea. I think that's great. All right, Terry, those are some great questions. You put Henry and I on the spot here. We had fun answering, so good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard. So it's creative review time, and today we're going to be taking a look at some out-of-home work that was, I'm going to put it up on the screen now. I thought it was pretty notable. You sent me the link to this work, and my reaction was very different than your reaction. And we haven't said the name of the brand yet, so we're going to ask in the comments below, before we mention the name of the brand, did you know what brand this was for and why this work looks the way that it does? And we invite the comments in the comments below. But taking a look at these various out-of-home executions, what do you think, Howard?
Well, first, let's mention that we saw this campaign in the article in Communication Arts. So I want to give a shout out to Communication Arts. That's where I came across this. And yeah, this is a recognized brand. It's very well known. Everybody probably has this product in their kitchen. And I looked at it and I said, yep, I get this is the brand. But I looked at it and I looked at it and I looked at it and I just didn't get it. And my first reaction was, I think this is an example of the marketers and the advertisers assuming, this is what we call, there's a term for this and it's escaping my memory just at the top of my head. But this is an example of the marketers and the brand assuming that we know what they know, that they are so well familiar with this iconic brand that everybody else will pick up on this. And you know what? I could be wrong, but I looked at this and I didn't get it. I didn't see, I think we can say the brand name at this point. I didn't see that this shape was the badge on the outside of Heinz ketchup bottles. And you said you saw it. Oh, I just didn't see it. Now, is that giving away my age? I don't know, because I think I've known this product a lot longer than the average person. It's been in my life since I was a kid. If this is so iconic, why didn't I see that? Again, I think the answer is because the brand assumed that they are so well known, everybody's going to get this. I could be wrong, but I know folks out there in Brief Brother land watching us, all 50 of you, or however many of you are, tell us in the comments section, did you see this shape and say Heinz right off the bat? Or were you like me and going, huh? I didn't get it.
So
your take, Henry.
In our sample of 2, you didn't get it, and I immediately got it. Like I clicked on the link, and my response to you back was, yeah, let's do this one for our creative review, because I thought it was brilliant. I think this is a perfect example of using distinctive assets in a surprising, unexpected way. That keystone shape of the Heinz label, to me, is something that is iconic. The food photography itself is beautiful, right? And the ketchup plays a prominent role in it. So immediately your eye is drawn toward it, and I recognize the shape immediately. So we talk a lot about distinctive assets, mental availability. To me, this is a perfect example. And the write-up in Communication Arts talks about, only a few brands could do this. And I agree that Heinz is one of them. For me, it was an immediate connection. I guess maybe we can field a survey and put the image in front of people and say, what is this for? And see if they can guess it. But I would be willing to bet that more people than not would get it and recognize that it was for Heinz. But I might be wrong. The other thing is that even if not everybody gets it, I think there's a value for the people that do get it. We've talked about the inside joke, the thing that I get that nobody else sees, and creating that connection with the brand and the mental availability. And that might be at work here too. But even if you don't necessarily recognize Heinz right off the bat, right? Certainly you see the food and you see the ketchup, it's creating some sort of desire in you. Of course, if they don't know that it's for Heinz, that doesn't help the brand very much. But again, I'm going to guess that most people will get the takeaway.
I think if I agree with you on anything, it is that the inside joke does have some value. It is the I know it and you don't kind of benefit. And I see that. The other thing I'm thinking now is that because this is out of home, there's a possibility that maybe you're sitting at the bus stop, or you're in a bus or public transportation, or you're driving down the road with somebody in your car, and you look at it and you say, huh? And your companion is going to say, you idiot, that's for Heinz. Of course, if I'm in the car and they go, huh? I'm going to say, yeah, I don't get that either.
That's funny. That reminded me of a TED Talk I saw once by this woman who wrote a book about being wrong. And what the whole premise of the speech and the book is that being wrong feels exactly like being right, except that you're wrong. You don't know that you're wrong, right? And she the example that she gives to kick off her TED Talk was that she was on a road trip with a friend, and she kept seeing this Chinese character on these signs, and she asked the friend, she said, what's that Chinese character? And the friend said, you dummy, that's a picnic table. It's not, it's that icon that they, when you pass the recreational areas, there's this icon that's a picnic table. She's like, that's a picnic table. And she, to her mind, because she wasn't on that wavelength, it looked like some sort of foreign language character. So I could see, and then she was like, oh yeah, like, so to your point, if somebody pointed it out to you and says, oh, that's the Heinz shield, the keystone from their label, you might say, oh, you're right, because you have been exposed to it a million times.
Right. Well, I don't know, we can't claim that anyone who responds to this in the comment section is going to be a scientific double-blind study. But it will still be interesting to see how many people. And I don't have any skin in this game. If I turn out to be the only one on the planet who didn't see it that way, I'm actually going to take pride in that for a minute. So good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard. He's Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And
He's
together,
Henry Gomez.
brothers. Till next time.
Next time.